So now I want to welcome Marla Warner and Signe Rowland. We have a quick round of applause for them both, please. Thanks. So I think one of the things that worked effectively for us in our last session about diversity and inclusion was establishing a glossary of terms, for lack of a better term, so that we had some common language. When we had our last session, there was a great debate even about what the term diversity meant. And in speaking with Marla recently, I came to learn that wellness, for example, is very different than well-being. And so I want to give our panel an opportunity to properly introduce themselves first, and then we'll dig into to some of that common language. So Marla Warner is from 4Health. Marla, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Everyone can hear me? Okay. So welcome. I'm thrilled to be here. I am here because I bring over 20 years of experience as a well-being professional. I come from first a background in exercise physiology and then stress management education and therapy. I spent about 13 years at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health as a stress management therapist and have been involved with organizational well-being and productivity programs for over 20 years. I consult, facilitate, and I'm a coach. I have a coaching background as a wellness coach as well as a positive psychology-focused coach, and bring certifications in applied positive psychology as well as applied mindfulness practices, and really bring all of that together to the mix of organizational and personal well-being services.
That's great. Thanks, Marla. And Signe, I was really interested in your title, the Director of Health at Work. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about you and League and what you do in your day job.
Hi, everybody. I'm Signe Rowland, and I work at League, which is a digital health benefits company. We're a startup based in Toronto, and even though we provide digital insurance products to a lot of our clients, we also provide these amazing workplace wellness programs that we call Health at Work, which is the division that I run. So we've been doing that for almost 3 years now. My background actually is in healthcare. I have a master's of public health, so I'm very interested in health systems and all of that. But basically, we work with companies across North America to develop wellness programs for their workplaces that really suit their individual culture, their employees, and what they're hoping to achieve.
That's awesome. Thanks, Signe. So let's talk first about health. How would we define health in a workplace context, and why does this matter? Do you want to start, Marla?
Well, why it matters, I'm going to hang on to. I think it's a bigger question. But health, I think of health as being fully whole, physically, emotionally, socially, emotionally, and spiritually.
Signe, what would you add to that?
I would add financially as well. It's one of our 4 pillars of wellness that we'll talk about later.
Okay, that's awesome. Wellness. Let's talk about wellness. How do we define that?
Wellness to me is doing anything in our lives that moves us in a positive direction. We can be on a spectrum and we may not be healthy, but if we are taking steps in a positive direction to become more well, then to me that is wellness.
What about you, Signe? Would you add anything to that?
I have nothing to add to that.
And this is also appeal to our audience, so if anyone wants to add to any of these definitions as we go through, and especially as they relate to how they activate inside your organizations, please feel free to raise your hand. Let's talk as well about well-being.
So I see well-being as a broader spectrum than wellness. That wellness is a piece of well-being, but well-being really includes our total selves. And because I've taken a deep dive in the world of positive psychology over the last few years, I really like to use the components of well-being as set out through positive psychology, and I'll speak to them, but the acronym is PERMA-V, and I'll come back to that.
Awesome. Signe, anything there?
No, I think Marla is really the expert on the 3 definitions. From my perspective, we talk about wellness mostly in organization, and I think well-being is certainly, like you said, the broader definition of how to be your healthiest, happiest, most productive, engaged. But in terms of definition, I don't have much to add.
Okay, great. And then finally, we have mindfulness. So I hear this one popping up. We have a partner who has this right in the name of their company. So how do we define mindfulness?
So to define mindfulness, I just have to go back to, for anyone who's familiar with mindfulness practices to John Kabat-Zinn's basic definition, which is intentionally paying attention in the present moment, non-judgmentally.
Anything from you?
I can't add anything to an expert's definition. No.
Okay, that's awesome. So now let's get into why some of this matters, and I alluded to this earlier. I think that certainly in the conversations that I have, health and wellness can get lumped into a bit of a warm fuzzy, and it's not always the connection to how it actually drives performance for a business or why it matters. It can be lost, and what can also happen is that it becomes, a lunch and learn that you do once, and then you've ticked that box and you're on to the next thing. So, Marla, I'm going to begin with you. Can you help establish for us and for our audience why health and wellness and well-being and mindfulness programs actually matter?
How long do we have? So, I think what's great about the times that we're in now is that there's just an abundance of research on all of this. And if I take it back to what I was mentioning, the positive psychology components of well-being, they are first, the P is about positive emotions. And we understand that we can learn to regulate our emotions in the workplace, to understand our brains under stress, as well as the fact that when teams experience more positive than negative emotions, what's called our positivity ratio, that focus increases, productivity increases, collaboration increases. So that's one piece. The E is engagement, and we know many organizations today are not as engaged as they'd like to be. And we know there are many things that we can do to support engagement, from having people use their natural talents and interests and strengths. Gallup Research does a lot of work in this area. And that when people become more engaged, some studies have found productivity to go up 40%. So it's quite significant. The R is relationships, that other people matter, always, personally, and in the workplace. And that civility and respect and training in effective communications, understanding, somebody by the name of Jane Dutton out of the University of Michigan talks about high quality connections. The 30-second, 1-minute connections that people have in the workplace that actually uplift us, allow our brains to be more creative and feel inspired and feel good about ourselves. These things that take no time at all, but create a vast difference to how we focus, engage, collaborate, again, produce in the workplace. Meaning and purpose, and that's the M. We know that when people have a sense that what they do is more than just a job, that they're really invested in it, that they understand the bigger picture in it. And that can be anybody in any organization, from the custodial staff to the CEO, everyone in between. But having that sense, that increases performance and productivity and engagement. And achievement, knowing that there are goals to achieve, that learning is something that we can do continuously, that impacts how people view and experience their work. And then the last one is vitality, and of course that is our physical fitness, how we nurture ourselves. This is such a great example of good, healthy food being around, what's served in a team meeting, how much people can stand up or sit down at their desks, all of that. So you take all of those components, there's research on every one that translates from the individual to the organization to really see a greater difference.
That's great. That is a good overall definition of why it matters. Now, this session is also being recorded, so this will really help those who couldn't attend today have a solid foundation. So that's our foundation. Now let's talk about getting started. And Signe, I'm curious about the 4 pillars of the Health at Work program, and how do those actually come to life for your customers?
That's a great question. So at League, we have 4 pillars of wellness or well-being. Many organizations will have different dimensions of wellness. So whatever you deem as an organization is what's important to you, then we're happy to work with. For us, those pillars are physical wellness, mental wellness, financial wellness, and social wellness. And for the reasons that Marla mentioned just now, all of those things can play into how an employee brings themselves to work every day, how engaged they are in their work, how connected they feel to their colleagues and to their organization's mission, and how actually healthy they feel that they're being at work through their sit-stand arrangement, the kitchen setup, giving time off to spend with family, to do physical activity, and all of that. So in terms of how we develop programs, oftentimes organizations will come to us with a need for insurance as their first thing because that's the second most expensive line item that every organization has next to salaries. So they'll come to us for an insurance need for health benefits, and then they'll realize that giving employees access to benefits is really only one piece of the equation. You really have to bring things into the workplace and provide opportunities for employees to be healthier and to engage with one another to get at those health outcomes. So what I do is I work with companies to devise programs, no matter where they are in their well-being journey. It could be a company that's relatively new, they haven't done a wellness program before, or it could be one that's had a program that's maybe a little bit stale and they're looking to switch things up. And we really work with them to figure out what workplace culture they're working in, what their team looks like, what their overall company goals and missions are, and then devise programs around that. Obviously, we don't like to implement everything at once. It's best done in a step-by-step manner. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, and so it's really a collaborative work arrangement in which League really helps those companies to develop those programs, track their progress over time, and then iterate on them based on the success metrics that we've identified at the beginning of the program and how we're doing as we track those metrics.
So this audience really has appetite for sort of tactical, practical examples. So briefly, could you give some examples of some of the programs that you've activated for
Sure. Sure. So I'll give one example of a company that came to us. This was in the fall. There's 700 people here in Toronto, and they had a couple ad hoc health and wellness programs here and there, maybe a lunch and learn, maybe a step challenge, that kind of thing. They had a gym on site, but they were looking for a company to basically come in and be the experts and run the program for them. So instead of trying to boil the ocean and develop a program that would really speak to 700 people at one time, they started with a pilot. So inviting only 100 people to participate at first, we did a 3-month pilot where we basically tried out different components of a wellness program, including a 4-week holistic wellness challenge. We did a biometric screening. We did a number of interactive lunch and learns, engaging workshops, fitness classes in their on-site gym, and then over the course of the 3 months, tracked employee sentiment and participation feedback. After those 3 months, we took a look at our data. We had a couple more conversations with the employees themselves, and then we basically took that program, blew it up, and devised one that would really target, all 700 people. So that program is it's exciting because we're rolling it out in next week. But I think the main thing is to remember that you can start small, that you don't have to start with a program that really tackles all 4 pillars or whatever dimensions of wellness that you have. You can start on one thing that you think that will have the most traction or you think that will make the most impact, and then grow from there.
I think that's actually a good segue to what I want to talk about next, which is, how do you achieve balance as you begin to launch these programs, whether in a pilot format or enterprise-wide? How do you balance, the needs of an individual, of teams, of the organization as a whole? So, Marla, let me come to you maybe first and ask for some perspective on that.
Okay. Well, I think Signe touched on it with a couple of points that every culture is different, that it isn't a one-size-fits-all, and having a sense of where you're starting from and where you want to go as any good coaching client, and setting that out with the steps in between that are laid out. And the steps, again, I would concur, can often be small steps, baby steps. Some of the ideas that I've worked with, again, similar to what Signe said, are having sort of modules where a company may be immersed in a well-being area, whether it be fitness or nutrition, mindfulness practices, communication, for 3 to 4 weeks. And they have all kinds of activities that they are involved with. And when they do that, of course, they're going to get different uptake from different people, but it allows for different people to participate as they would like to, and to reap the benefits as they do. And I think that helps to balance just different needs, different people.
You can certainly talk about this, Signe, in terms of the work that you're doing with customers. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to devise a program in which they're going to satisfy 100% of employees. I don't need to tell you that as HR professionals. You deal with these kinds of issues all day, every day. I think one of the things that really helps as you think about developing a program or working on one that you may already have is that you really need to get sort of leadership buy-in from the top. So making sure that you're aligning the program to the actual sort of overall goals, mission, and vision of the organization so that you have that support and that budget if you need it. And then getting the support from the ground up, maybe devising a wellness committee and helping the employees actually weigh in on the types of activities that they think their colleagues or their departments would be interested in. It's a difficult job, but you don't have to do it alone. There's many partners in the wellness industry who can help you. League being one of them, Marla obviously being another. So to bring all the stakeholders together is really probably your job, but there's experts and there's people across your organization who really, I'm sure, would love to be involved and to help build out what those programs would look like.
That's a great segue, I think, to the next line of questioning, which is about, so this is the only time I'll speak for this entire audience where I think it's true of this audience that, it's difficult to get your ideas funded. It's just tough. And so there's a Deloitte study that comes out every year on human capital management trends. 87% of CEOs say, yes, culture and engagement and the people side of the business is my number one business priority, and an equal percentage concede that they haven't done anything about it. So it's tough to get your programs funded. So with that in mind, as you rally stakeholders, what are some of the things that you can arm our audience with to make that connection, to make sure that these programs are actually business focused? Marla, you're nodding.
Okay. I really like to look at the work that I do as core competencies, that it is not, just something to add in. I'm talking about topics like resilience, like mental health and well-being, and we know today in the competitive marketplace, global marketplace, that we all want our individuals to be more resilient people, to be healthier people, to have more focus, more energy. Mindfulness has, so many different studies around it, which is why organizations like Google and Facebook and NetNet, yes, they can afford these programs, but they're bringing them in because they see the difference to how people engage and focus and collaborate and get along with one another, and particularly in the face of adversity. So really my term is core competencies, and that these are, the question of can you afford to do it, I like to flip to can you afford not to do it today?
Sure, and just to add on to that, a lot of the studies done on the effectiveness of wellness programs have really focused on return on investment, which is really difficult to track, especially if you're only looking at it over the course of 1 year. You're not going to see a ton of changes in your claims, drug claims, and all sorts of other, insurance claims over the course of 1 year. You really have to track that over time. And so being able to show the financial impact just from that perspective in 1 year is going to make your program look like it falls a little bit flat. So what we like to talk about is really that value on investment. What else are you doing for your organization? If you're not able to confidently show that return on investment from the dollars perspective on the health insurance, what you can do is show increased presenteeism, decreased turnover, increased engagement, and all of that obviously leads to just value for the programs that you're getting. And it creates a culture in which your employees want to go to work every day, that you're attracting the best talent as you're looking to grow your teams, and that people actually, they go to work happy, healthy, engaging with one another, and creating the type of work environment that you're setting out to achieve.
I 1,000,000% agree. I think picking one KPI that's business related and then attaching your request for funds to that and how it will impact that, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to pick on Amy from Sticker U because I had coffee with Amy recently, and she had, I thought, a great example of how she made the argument for doing a financial literacy program. Are you comfortable telling that story? Sure. Okay. Yeah. Look at that. This is my Phil Donahue moment.
Okay, so I'm Amy and I work at Sticker U. I decided to put in a financial literacy program because which involves a financial advisor coming in scheduled once a month, but then we also have we're redoing our benefits plan completely. So he's coming in once a week and sectioning off time, where he helps employees pick what benefits plan really works for them. In that case, that means people aren't going for the biggest package, the most expensive one when they don't need it. The part that I think you're touching on is that I made the argument we need a financial advisor because when people are looking at their budget, a lot of people make the argument like, I can't make my rent, I need a raise. But if you can have a budget and you feel financially stable, sorry, I'm really nervous. Employees don't feel the need as much that they're like pushed for their budget and that they need a raise because they can't make rent. It should be looking at what they spend their money on, where they're saving, how they're saving for their retirement.
Not toxic. Yeah. Yeah. A little round of applause. I thought that was such a great idea because that was Amy to me is an example of someone who really understands the pulse of her organization. And I just thought that was a common sense way to make an argument and get funding for something that she believed in. And it connected with your founder. So I think that's a great way to align to business impact. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about business impact. I heard you talk about the pilot that you ran for a customer that's about to go enterprise-wide. You talked a little bit about data. So let's talk about the role of data and maybe ROIs can have in these sorts of programs. Do you want to start there, Signy?
Sure. So as I mentioned, ROI is really tracking typically it tracks your spend on benefits year over year. In this particular pilot, because we were only measuring the impact of the wellness program over the course of 1 quarter, we were measuring participation and engagement in those programs as well as just feedback. And the way we did was through a survey. We worked with their HR team to develop the questions to put on the survey, of course, and to really get at the feedback and try to understand if people weren't attending the sessions, what was the issue there, if it was coming from the setup of their work environment, what was happening internally that prevented them from going, and then what would they be hoping to actually achieve over the course of a year-long program. So that was the kind of soft data that we collected from the pilot. In terms of longer-term data that you'd want to collect, of course, you want to look at obviously your benefit spend, so claims history. Your broker can help sift through that information with you. But the other thing is to look at those employee turnover rates, the engagement piece that way, the productivity, which is a little bit harder to measure, but you can kind of get a sense of it in your workplace as it changes over time. And then the positive sentiment. You can do culture and engagement surveys and get a sense of how people are appreciating their wellness programs and the other things that you're doing for them. You can do sort of a longer engagement survey at the beginning of the year, do it on a yearly basis. You can do pulse surveys to understand how your programs are doing. But I think getting feedback is the most important aspect because you may think your program's hitting on all the right aspects and that you're really successful and people are coming, but you may realize that there's an area that you're missing that people maybe don't feel comfortable speaking up about to you directly. And then you can take that data and just iterate. If you decide to roll out a wellness program, you're not locked into that program no matter what it is, right? Over the course of the year, a couple of years, you can always change it. You can, without even changing the budget, you can add services, you can change them, you can, add more frequency, change the providers, the partners, and all of that, and hopefully, change those metrics in a positive way over time.
Marlo, what would you add in terms of you would add nothing? All right.
No, no,
Yeah.
I really, I think Signe really covered it off there.
Okay, that's great. Let's talk finally as we wind down this part of the program. I mentioned the idea that in many of these many organizations, health and wellness becomes a one-off. And so, what are some of the things? What are the core competencies? How do we establish foundations so that this isn't a once a year, activity that everyone groans about, and is actually part of the culture? And by that I mean, the way we do things inside of an organization. Some final thoughts on how that can come to life, Marla.
Um, I think again, it's knowing where you want to go and having a place to start. And obviously, it would be nice if a well-being program can be sustainable and ongoing, and at the same time to be aware that it has to be authentic. And I'm in so many organizations, and we may be doing some programs on stress, but then people will come up to me, of course, afterwards and say, "Oh yeah, right. They're giving us a stress management program just so they can add to our stress." So common
Really good
line,
idea.
yeah. So really having an authentic view towards where you're going, seeing buy-in from the top, having these things role modeled, and another term that I really like is working your way towards what is called a positive organization. Positive organizations are organizations that really walk the talk, where there is good food available and there is time to move and stretch. It's in the big programs, but it's also in the very small pieces that are integrated into the organization, so that ultimately we're building, stronger, healthier, more resilient organizations by supporting the individuals in the workplace. And what I often tell people is start with three things. Name, three ideas that you're going to do over the course of the year that are accessible, that are fun, where there are at least some people that are really engaged and enthusiastic who can kind of lead the activities and exercises, having committees, Signe mentioned earlier, having people all parts of the organization involved in possible. Those are a few of the basics.
Signe, maybe I can guess at a couple of the elements for you. I've heard piloting before you go enterprise-wide. I've heard feedback having a critical role. What else might you add to that as a final thought?
You can build on the foundation of what your culture has today. So just looking around this office, for example, this is an amazing common space. There's a dartboard, ping pong table. All of those things are part of this company's culture, and it's the way that employees engage with their workplace. So today you may have and culture obviously is something that evolves over time. It's not stagnant. You can't control it necessarily, but you can help shape it. So I think what you can do is embed some of the things that are really unique to your organization as part of this health and wellness program, because it's all at driving better engagement and making people feel more tied and involved in their organization's mission. So, if you have a ping pong table, do a ping pong tournament. If you want to bring in a ping pong instructor to teach people who've never maybe tried it before, try that. Like, build on what you have today, identify some of the things that employees love today, and build those out. And then in ways that you think your organization really needs improvement, you can start small and see how it goes from there.
So before we get to questions, how about a quick round of applause for Marla and Signe? So we did get a question in advance. We got a number of questions, and I think this is a good one about ideas for wellness initiatives or challenges for national organizations or organizations that are dealing with multiple locations. Who wants to weigh in there first?
Sure. There's so many things. Many companies work with the monthly themes that we have in Canada. There's Nutrition Month. There's October is Healthy Workplace Month. May is Mental Health Awareness. There are often weeks, but we make a month because there's a week is just not enough time to do these programs. So that's one thing that organizations can do. They can do stair climbing challenges to tying into some of the bigger fitness activities, the many rides that there are, the CN Tower climbs. So for those who want to be more challenged and more involved, Some of the activities that I've done in organizations that take no money at all are things like a limit complaining day. Anybody can do that. And you know, there's a whole lot of science to complaining and what happens to our brains when we complain. We just move ourselves into a stress response, and our thinking goes very, very down and very narrow, and very difficult to be involved with things. So, you know, very simple things, or a day where we really recognize, or a week or a month where we really recognize and encourage other people. We know there's you know, so much research around frequent recognition and encouragement, and how often do we do that? So those are very simple themes that anybody can do through you know, anywhere. Signy?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think recognizing those tiny days, a gratitude day, employee appreciation day, mental health awareness week. There's certainly organization-wide programs or just activities to do on those days. One of the things that we offer at League is a 4-week holistic wellness challenge. So it doesn't just get at increasing your water intake or taking more steps, but it's around energy, sleep, nutrition, mindfulness, exercise, all of the aspects of wellness. And we actually had a different client, who decided to roll this out. They thought they would get about 100 participants. They're a big construction company across Canada, and so they obviously have satellite offices, but also multiple different construction sites that employees work at. They thought they'd get about 100 people participate. They had 200 people participate, actually 197, which is huge. They said that they had bigger participation and engagement than they'd ever had because the program was so holistic. The reason why it was so successful is because it mostly existed online in a digital world, right? So today, even though you're a construction worker or maybe you work in an office, most of your life exists through email or through Slack or virtual meetings and all of that. So making sure that those programs are accessible in your real work environment really limits the barriers to participation that way.
Those are great insights. So before we wrap, any other questions for our panel, I should say, for Brittany, for Signy, or for Marla? Yes, go ahead.
I think so. League, first of all, we do offer all of those things. We do on-site biometric screenings. We do all sorts of other types of clinics, flu clinics, physiotherapy, chiropractor services, all of that. But we do biometric screenings, and we also have a virtual care component. So if an employee has League, not only can they go on site to their office and get that 20-minute biometric screening, if there's any issues, hopefully take those issues to their primary care physician and get a closer look at them. But we have a virtual care service called Health Concierge through the League app, in which an employee can actually talk to a healthcare provider and get recommendations on what to do about any issues they have or what resources to access in their community. I think a lot of the issues, and this is sort of across North America, that exist with those on-site clinics is that employees feel like it's a bit big brother-ish sometimes when their employers are trying to get them to participate. So oftentimes, companies will tie financial incentives to completing those screening days, $100, $200 even, to go and do that screening. But that's all well and good. The thing is that you need to, if the employee is identified as having, elevated blood pressure or blood glucose or something like that, they actually need to go to their doctor after that screening clinic in order to get that problem taken care of, instead of just looking at their numbers and then going back to their desk. So I think where that continuum of care can often fall short is making sure that those screening clinics are followed up by an actual visit with a doctor, and that's where the virtual care piece, which sounds like you're very familiar with, can really play into effect in having that proactive outreach to the employees to make sure that they're following up on those issues. Yes, and I totally agree with all of that. I think oftentimes employers maybe don't think that they have the responsibility to help their employees connect with those physicians to get those medical issues taken care of or looked at. But I think you're right that the tides are changing, and employers now feel they have a greater obligation to help their employees be healthier from that primary care objective rather than just the wellness sort of engagement, happiness perspective. I think Canada is certainly a little bit further behind the US when it comes to developing these types of programs. A lot of mid to larger size companies in the US have on-site medical clinics where you can actually just go to a doctor right there and have your biometrics taken and have health plans put in place to try and reduce your risk factors. But I think things are changing in Canada. It's not just about the employer perks, about that building the community, but it's about you have to build that foundation of medical care and that foundation of health. And so Akira, League, and there's a lot of other companies that are hoping to change this, but I think companies do have an obligation to start looking at that more intently.
Okay, this is the last one. Okay, last question. Yep. Great. Thank you. No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And actually, it reminds me that we have an opportunity to continue these conversations after these events, certainly through our Slack channel. We're also activating a task force for this topic for health and wellness. So Camille Kilindez and Kenise Jaffer from are leading our diversity and inclusion one, which you'll hear more about. And we're looking for volunteers to curate content, best practices, insight, tools, tips, templates, these sorts of things. So if you have an interest, please see me. That'll be our final word today. I certainly want to thank Influitive for giving us their digs, our amazing partners at Mindful Snacks for giving us not only their time and their attention and their insight, but all the good things to eat. I want to thank Brittany for just beginning the day in a great way. I thought that was wonderful. So I also want to thank Signe and Marla for their insight and their time, and I especially want to thank all of you for your time and your attention. What continues to make this community strong is the contributions and the insight of everyone here. So all good ideas will be considered. So if you have one, please let me know. And whether it's for a topic, a speaker, a format, I'm all ears. The session's being recorded, and you'll hear more about our next session again on April 25th on marijuana in the workplace. Have a great day. Be well. Thanks.